You know, you have to stop saying that you're going to move to Canada whenever you're mad at something in the US. As a Canadian, I'm sorry, but no, you can't. I know we're friendly, but Canada's not your safe house. I mean, we barely let Canadians into Canada anymore, so please, pick somewhere else. I hear Finland is really lovely this time of year.
Hi, besties. It's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Do you know what I was thinking? I have a letter that I've been sitting on for a really long time of Ryan Reynolds and a statement he gave to police in Vancouver. And I just, I think people are very confused about why people keep claiming that the judge is corrupt. The judge bristled and got really annoyed by some of the letters that Perez Hilton was sending, and probably perhaps content creators who were telling the court that they believed he was being biased. And, judges don't like to hear the truth sometimes. And the facts of the matter is that the New York district, the Southern District of New York, is literally one of the most corrupt federal districts in the United States. They have had, and they litigate more corruption cases against public figures, clerks, judges, law enforcement, public officials than other areas of the country. The corruption is thick. The history of corruption in New York is deep. And so it's not at all illogical for anyone in this case to suggest or even imply that there is corruption, because some of the rulings that are happening here wouldn't happen in any other court. The rope that Blake and Ryan are getting and allowed to continue to get away with is I've never seen before. The judge completely siding almost exclusively with Blake over and over and over again and ignoring factual evidence of illegal subpoenas or abusive process or whatever it is, turning a blind eye to what he sees them doing, and then listening, and just everything that Wayfair does is wrong, you know? And I want to share something with you because I haven't shared this with you before. But I wouldn't put it past Ryan Reynolds to attempt to influence the judge or the court and use his power in order to do so. I received a letter from and a whole case file from when Ryan tried to put a paparazzo in prison. Back in 2015 and 16, he claimed that he was hit by a car. And because this paparazzo took a photograph of Ryan in his Deadpool makeup before the film had come out, where he looks like he's gone through a fire, that had never been seen before. And he got a picture of it, and he put it out on the internet, and Ryan lost his mind. He was so angry. A photograph of him in makeup of Deadpool prompted a months long, years long tirade by him, Ryan, to try to imprison this paparazzo false allegations. And then he used his influence in Vancouver of the amount of money he would bring to the state with films. And I want to just read you a letter that he wrote to the police. This was after he had given a statement. It's from April 12th of 2015. And I have never, ever, ever shared this whole letter before. So I want you to have a peek inside the mind of Ryan Reynolds. Hi, my name is Ryan Reynolds, and I'm an actor, public figure from Vancouver, BC, Canada. My wife is also an actor and public figure named Blake Lively, married named Blake Reynolds. Our 4-month-old daughter is James Inez Reynolds. My mother's name is Tamara Lee Reynolds. We have a long history of events involving Richard Fidek. My first memory of Richard occurred in Vancouver 4 years ago. My wife and I were in a city for a week to visit with family and friends. While driving a car, I noticed Richard following us in his vehicle. We were making our way from our hotel in downtown Vancouver to my mother's apartment in Kitsilano. Richard followed us at unlawful speeds, often bringing his vehicle dangerously close to our vehicle. I want to remind you that none of this happened. None of it. Concern for the safety of my wife, me, and my surrounding pedestrians and commuters because he's helping everyone. I pulled my car over and exited the vehicle to ask the person who was following us with such recklessness. As I exited the car, I saw Richard Fidek produce a long lens camera and proceeded to take photographs of me. Being a public figure, I'm used to an understanding of why I might have photos taken while out in public. However, it is unusual to be engaged by a photographer who is simultaneously driving a vehicle in this manner. His unusual and aggressive methods were extremely alarming to me. With the understanding that he is a paparazzi, I chose at the time to not engage in a verbal conversation with Fidek and instead returned to my car and carried on to my destination. Fidek continued to follow us and continued to position his vehicle dangerously close to ours, so close that I was fairly certain the front end bumper of his vehicle would eventually touch the back end bumper of our vehicle. At the time, we were confused, frustrated, and afraid of his behavior. Once we reached our destination, Richard remained outside of the apartment building of my mother's address. We observed him from the window of the apartment pacing outside the building, walking around the entrance and into the underground parkade and hiding behind the bushes across the street. Now, mind you, I already did a video on this. So all of what he's saying is a complete lie. It doesn't match any of the evidence, but this is a completely fabricated story that didn't happen. That's like the truth. Okay. If you want to see the episode that I talked about this, it is in my podcast playlist. My wife has a well documented history with a stalker, and the behavior she's witnessing from Videk was deeply concerning to her. For the remainder of that particular trip, we saw Videk at least a dozen more times from our hotel room window and from the window in the fitness facility in the hotel, located on the fifth floor. As a precaution to avoid the vehicular collision with Videk, we remained in our hotel room for the rest of our trip, choosing instead to have family visit us at our location. Approximately 3 years ago, we returned to Vancouver for a similar trip. We were so concerned that Fidek would be waiting at the airport, as was often a behavior as we'd witnessed of him in the past, that we instead decided to fly into Seattle and simply rent a car and drive the 2 hours into Vancouver from the SeaTac airport. Unfortunately, he discovered we were in Vancouver soon after. On this particular trip, both my wife and I witnessed escalation in the erratic and aggressiveness actions of the deck. Once again, driving down from our hotel to visit my mom in Kitsilano, Richard, this time accompanied by an Asian female, engaged us by pursuing our vehicle at dangerously close distance. Driving between us and Richard's vehicle, I proceeded through the intersection as the traffic signal changed from green to yellow. The bus was directly behind me, and Richard was directly behind the bus. Because the traffic light changing, the bus stopped before entering the intersection, leaving cross the intersection despite the light. Other motorists honked their horns, and one in particular car locked its brakes as Richard made his way illegally across the intersection. I pulled over. In that moment, my wife and I became concerned that our being followed was now a liability for any number of third parties. So if you notice, no matter what Ryan does, he always frames himself as like the hero of everyone around him. And again, this did not happen. When he claimed this happened, Richard was not even in Vancouver. Um, our concern was that Richard could cause a serious accident leading to injuries. At this point, I decided the situation was far more serious than previously thought. We parked on the north side of Broadway, approximately 50 meters from Vine Street. I felt the only choice we had available to us at this point was to call 911. At the time, I couldn't find my phone, and Richard Fidek parked his car directly behind us. My wife was afraid and crying. I was in a state of disbelief that a photograph would be worth this level of risk and disregard for others' safety. It was my firm belief that Fidek was also taking pleasure in the pursuit and imitation dispensed by his actions. We often witnessed him smiling or waving as he drove up beside or behind our cars. My mom's apartment was only 2 blocks away, and we decided 911 would be called from there. As I turned the car around and made a U turn, Videk did the same. He seemed to underestimate the turning radius of his vehicle and brought his car up on the sidewalk and on the south side of Broadway. He continued driving onto the sidewalk until his car completed the turn onto Broadway. Once we arrived at my mom's house, 911 was called and 2 officers responded shortly thereafter. He drove his car away moments before the police arrived, and the police questioned 2 men outside the apartment building, who I came to understand were also photographers working in some kind of syndicate with Richard. So none of that happened. Literally, he just made that up. because he was mad about Richard and a photograph leaking. 2 years ago, I began working on a Canadian film entitled The Captive in Sudbury, Ontario. My time working on the film was just over 3 weeks. My wife and I were staying at a small hotel throughout the course of filming. We were quite upset that we soon discovered Richard was had traveled to Sudbury and was stalking us in and around town. We were involved in approximately 6 similar pursuits to the one mentioned above. We witnessed Richard inside the hotel in which we were staying, roaming the halls. He was not a registered guest. That's actually false. He spent the majority of his time on my film set while I worked and spent the off hours inside and outside of our hotel. He followed us everywhere. We went until we eventually stopped leaving the hotel unless it was essential trips, getting groceries, or going to work. My wife was so scared that after the first week, she didn't leave the hotel again. After the completion of filming, Richard followed us to Toronto, where we remained outside our hotel at all hours. He actually had and provided a copy of plane tickets that disproved that he wasn't even in Toronto at all. He was already back in Vancouver when he claimed that happened. Approximately 1 year ago, my wife began to work on a film in Vancouver called Age of Adeline. This was a particularly difficult time for her. Videk was relentlessly pursuing us during the course of production. He was often accompanied by an Asian female I presumed to be his wife or girlfriend. She often took photos as well. At the time, my wife was newly pregnant, and the stress for her was unimaginable. Out of concern for her emotional well-being, Blake chose not to leave the Shangri-La Hotel in Vancouver unless it was absolutely essential daily work obligations. Over the course of the 2 months of filming, we saw Richard most days, sometimes 5 to 6 times a day, sometimes with an Asian female, and sometimes alone. Because of the long history and nature of Richard's erratic and threatening behavior, my wife chose to hire a driver with a background in security. Richard nonetheless kept up with the dangerous pursuits. In one instance, he'd followed me to Granville Island while my wife chose to remain in the hotel. He blocked my car several times by stopping directly in front of me, angling his car at a diagonal in the middle of the brazenly parked at his car at such an angle in the middle of the flowing traffic. As he did so, he took pictures of me in my car while I had no option to proceed forward or backwards. He smiled and waved at me and then moved his car enough to release traffic. Moments later, he positioned his vehicle behind me again to dangerously close distance. And this also did not happen. You can watch my other video on that. But this is where Ryan flexes his weight. And I think ultimately this is why the case dragged on for so long, because he threatened Vancouver. He wrote business implications. This has nothing to do with this. At the beginning of March of this year, I began work on a large scale Marvel film financed by 20th Century Fox Film Corporation. The film is titled Deadpool, and as of March 1st, we have been shooting said film in Vancouver. I serve as both the lead actor and producer. I've been involved in the writing of the film, and since arriving to work in Vancouver, Videk has been unsurprisingly relentless in his pursuit, intimidation, and threatening actions. Loitered around the Shangri-La residence, the building in which my wife and I, with our daughter, have rented an apartment for the duration of filming in Vancouver. My wife and I have seen Videk nearly every single day, sometimes 5 to 6 times in a single afternoon. He can easily view him sitting outside the building from the window of an apartment, and just as before, from the fifth or sixth floor fitness facility. I see him daily at our filming locations and in and around the base camp where we prep to shoot for the day. It is our firm belief that he is attempting to obtain pictures of the baby in order to sell them. That's a lie. Absolutely a lie. Absolutely a lie. Both my wife and I are public figures who chose this profession. Our child did not. It is our choice to never put our baby in the flow of public life, which is weird because his kids were now in Deadpool, right? In any respect. Because we have not released pictures of our baby to the media, something of a bounty for this photograph. We believe that in addition to obtaining photographs of me, my wife, and our baby, he's dangerous to our personal safety and those around us, including but not limited to our child. I've witnessed him driving no less than 4 different cars in and around our residence, many of these times erratically. I've also witnessed him driving within the secured underground parking area, which requires a specialized fob key available only to tenants of the building. I believe has gained access to the area by following the cars through the security gate before it closes. I know this can be reflected in security footage obtained by management of the Shangri-La residences. So he lied to them and said that, I'm this big time producer and he's after a picture of my baby, which was not true. And he had never once published a single photograph of his baby. On April 10th, 2015, I observed Fedek in the secured underground parking area. I know he does not live in this particular building, nor would he have access to this part of underground parking. It is not an area available to the public for parking. As I pulled into the underground and entered the secure area through the gate, I saw Richard pull out of the parking stall. I observed him look into my vehicle as he passed. He headed down the parking structure in front of my vehicle. I parked in my registered stall and carried on toward the bottom level P6. So he literally ran and chased him down on foot. I felt uneasy and concerned. Given the history we've had with this man, I was worried that he gained access to the building, or worse, our apartment unit. Sounds like he has a lot of paranoia. I wanted to dial 911 immediately, but there was no cell reception that deep into the parkade. I walked down into P6 to see if I could obtain the plate of his vehicle as he was driving. I did not recognize this particular vehicle. I only recognized Richard immediately. As I reached the lowest level of the parking garage, I saw Richard in the Pontiac sedan, license plate, blah, blah, blah. Upon seeing him, he drove toward me at a high rate of speed. I stepped out of the way and ran up the exit to the gate. So he chased him 6 floors up. When I arrived at the exit gate, Richard Fedek was idled in the car waiting for the gate to open. I approached his car. I was in front of the car when I asked, "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here." My tone was non threatening. I was mainly curious despite my concern and fear. He did not respond. He made eye contact with me and smiled. He then drove the car forward into my legs at the gate open behind me and only half open. My knee hyperextended, and in order to avoid serious injury, I pulled my leg back and landed on the hood of his car. None of that happened. He continued looking at me, smiling and laughing. As he accelerated the vehicle, I rolled off the side and struck his car with my hand. I then yelled for him to stop. However, he fled. So he literally stood in front of the guy's car, and then he wasn't hit. There was no proof he was ever hit. It's another lie. But do you see how he spent the whole letter trying to, like, paint this man as a complete danger and a menace to society? I was not acting in a threatening manner, but wanted to know why he was there, given my knowledge of his history and erratic behavior. So, in this letter, Ryan has admitted that when people follow him on the street in a car, he'll pull off to the side and yell and scream at paparazzo. He has no problem getting into confrontations with people that he believes are after him. He seems rather paranoid. He admits to chasing Fedek in a carport and running 6 floors down and then 6 floors up as he tries to leave. Like, Fedek was literally just trying to leave, and he wasn't there to take a photograph of Ryan. He had been on detail for Naomi Watts, and who was in Vancouver at the time and was staying at the same place. But Ryan is so paranoid that he thinks that everyone is after him, and he develops these crazy theories that, like, everything is about him, and everything is imminent danger, and he needs to protect and save his wife and save the public. Like, he acts like he is Deadpool. And during that altercation, Richard said that Ryan punched his car door window with his fist and tried to, like, hit his car and was going full Deadpool on his car, like attacking his car. He wasn't even there for Ryan. And then here's where he flexes. The film I'm currently working on, Vancouver, could have shot in a number of cities. Many studios are lobbying to bring the production of their respective communities. Locations were scouted in New Orleans, Detroit, and Europe. As I mentioned above, I'm a producer on the film and also born and raised in Vancouver. The decision of which city to bring the production of Deadpool to is that of the producers. So he's telling them, listen, I brought this to Vancouver and I'm going to bring you a bunch of jobs. And just because he's doing this, you better help me. It's my job to find a suitable location which serves both the storyline and budget of the film. Vancouver is not only a special place for me, but also a world class destination for film production. State of the art facilities notwithstanding, it's a beautiful city to both work and live. I grew up here. I love Vancouver with all my heart. And this is disgusting what he does. The production is estimated to pump approximately $37.5 million into the community, as well as create over 1,000 jobs. While I have no regrets about bringing production home to Vancouver, I was and remain deeply concerned about Fedek. Last year, I debated for days about whether or not to bring Deadpool to Vancouver. The only deterrent to shooting here was indeed Fedek. I did not want to put my wife and family in a dangerous situation with this person. In the end, we felt the benefits outweighed the risk and decided to proceed with production in our hometown. We felt we could maximize all Vancouver has to offer, and I was personally very happy to be home and see my mom and brothers. But if Vancouver allows Videk to run free, he might have to reconsider other future projects. That said, I believe Richard Videk's actions extend far beyond simply photographing us at our home and work environments. I believe there is something very deeply disturbed about this man. We believe his desire to photograph us exceeded only by his intention to terrorize us. While it may be determined conjecture throughout the years, he has always imbued a sense of arrogance and glee in his behavior. I have been working in the entertainment industry for 25 years, and I have a very long history in association with navigating public life and all it entails. Paparazzi is a byproduct of the job. I don't enjoy that aspect, but I understand it. I don't complain about it, do I have an expectation that people might understand how awkward and invasive it all can be. I am obscenely lucky and fortunate to have the opportunities I've had to work in an industry and community I love. Being a working actor is a rare gift. I've had an experience with paparazzi for 2 decades. I have never, in all my experiences, seen anything even remotely close to the dangerous behavior exhibited by Fedek. So he sets it up like he's so dangerous and that he had such deep concerns about bringing his filming to Vancouver and then said, listen, we're about to make you $37 million, and I'm about to employ 1,000 people with your jobs. It's like layering on manipulation to them, like telling them how powerful he is and reminding them who he is over and over and over again. His behavior impacts my decision making. His presence in our life impacts our everyday activities. We no longer feel safe leaving our apartment. We do not feel safe at our respective work environments. We do not feel safe visiting the homes of our friends and family. With his presence in our lives, I do not feel comfortable bringing any other film production to the city of Vancouver. For me, it's deeply troubling that Fedek's behavior could have economic implications for the entire community. After these last events, I feel strongly that the pattern of this photographer's behavior is becoming increasingly aggressive, and I'm hoping for some form of remedy that will prevent his presence in my life, the life of my mother, and my wife and child. This is a matter of my family's safety, and I have good reason to be afraid and troubled by his actions. So, if you're not familiar with how bribery works, what Ryan is doing, it's called quid pro quo bribery. And what he's telling them without saying it directly, but heavily implying it, is I have millions of dollars. In fact, I'm about to make your city $37.5 million. And because you allow this reckless, dangerous man to terrorize me and pedestrians and all these other things, unless you do something about this man based on my trumped up allegations, mind you, he provided no evidence for any of these, him being stalked. There was zero evidence about the car and driving on the side of the road. There was zero evidence he followed him to an island. There was no evidence that he followed him from Sudbury to Toronto. In fact, there was actual proof that he was never there, right? He trumps up and fabricates this all. So he wants Vancouver, the city, and the law enforcement. This is a letter to police that they need to arrest him. They need to put in a permanent injunction against him. They're seeking a restraining order, and they want them to imprison him to the fullest extent of the law. And if they don't, Ryan's telling them, I'm not going to bring my other films to your city. Okay. That's called quid pro quo bribery. You're making a claim that if you don't do this, I won't do that. I won't give you this. Or you should do something about this, or else I'm not going to do this. He's not directly saying to them, if you don't, but he flat out says that if something doesn't happen, that his behavior could have economic implications on the entire community. It's deeply troubling that Richard, have economic implications, meaning if they don't do something about Richard, Vancouver is going to miss out on millions of dollars of films being shot by Ryan and his production company. Mind you, he brought Deadpool 2 to Vancouver partially, but then he has never been back to Vancouver since the woman died. The stunt double died, and that investigation happened, and they were found liable for negligence and workplace negligence by the government agency that evaluated the scene of the crash. He's never been back to film in Vancouver since that he finished wrapping Deadpool 2 and the death occurred of that stunt woman. So he made this quid pro quo bribe, and law enforcement went with it for years, years. And Fedek was not cleared of these charges until 2017. 2 years late, 2.5 years later, they withdrew the charges against him. Not guilty. No charges. Nothing. Because they had no evidence. Because Blake and Ryan delayed and delayed and delayed until the last minute. And then when they realized they couldn't win, then suddenly the Crown drops the charges. So if you're wondering if Ryan would possibly bribe a judge, well, he attempted to bribe the city of Vancouver. He was never charged with it, but on paper, that looks like a bribe to me. And they went with it, and they went on his word, and he promised to bring them money. So would he make similar offers to Lyman? I don't know. Judge Lyman's brother, Doug, is repped by Salma Hayek's husband's company, the talent agency. Only 2 or 3 weeks before Judge Lyman decides to throw out the entire case against Baldoni, Blake is seen with Salma Hayek for the first time in years. And Doug Lyman is repped by Salma Hayek's husband's talent agency. Nothing ever is a coincidence with these people, literally ever. If he was willing to so blatantly and brazenly quid pro quo bribe Vancouver, I have zero doubts that he would do something like this, in my opinion. So that's why everyone should have a heavy suspicion of all of the rulings, because they're getting away with things that no one else would. And the judge is blatantly ignoring things that he would never ignore from others. And he keeps giving Blake chances that he's not affording to any other party. And he got really angry when Perez called him out for being corrupt. So I don't know. What do you think he's made? What kind of deals under the table do you think he's made? What strings is he trying to pull here? And when will the public court system actually, be transparent here? And when will Wayfarer actually do something to remove him from the case? I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed, and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, bestie.